While we wait to see what Donald Trump's plans are for Canadian steel and aluminum this week, Doug Ford isn't waiting. Ontario's Premier sent a strong message to the Americans. The province is moving ahead with a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to several U.S. states.
The fight. We will apply maximum pressure to maximize our leverage. That's why today we're moving forward with a 25% surcharge on electricity exports. For the 1.5 million American homes and businesses that Ontario powers, homes and businesses in Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. This surcharge will cost families and businesses in these states up to $400,000 each and every single day. On an average,
Canada just showed it can use electricity as a powerful weapon in the trade fight. One bold move exposed how much the United States depends on Canadian power, giving Canada a stronger position while leaving America at risk of higher power bills and weaker energy security. Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to American customers in New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. The surcharge affected power supplied to approximately 1.5 million American homes and businesses, and was later retracted following direct negotiations. But what the episode exposed in real time, with no ambiguity, is that cross-border electricity flows between the United States and Canada, which had operated free of tariffs for a full century, are now vulnerable to the same political pressures disrupting steel, aluminum, automobiles, and lumber. The electric system that drives lower consumer costs and improves reliability on both sides of the border entered 2025 as a potential casualty of a trade dispute it had never previously been part of. The physical architecture of the cross-border electricity relationship is documented in specific infrastructure numbers. Electricity flows between the two countries through 31 high-voltage international power lines. On the American side, the Northeast states Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, Pennsylvania, and Vermont experienced the strongest import flows from Canada's New Brunswick, Quebec, and Ontario provinces. The Midwest states of Michigan, Minnesota, and North Dakota exchange power with Ontario, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. The Northwest states of Montana and Washington are strongly connected to Alberta and British Columbia. The United States imported 11,381 net gigawatt hours of Canadian electricity in 2024. That volume is equivalent to the annual electricity consumption of approximately 1 million residential homes. The fundamental commercial logic driving this cross-border trade is straightforward. Ontario and Quebec have made sustained heavy investments in hydroelectric and nuclear power, creating surplus low-cost generation capacity. The northeastern United States, by contrast, has some of the highest electricity prices in the country. Electricity flows from where it is cheap to where it is expensive, from Canadian surplus generation to American high-price markets, while Canadian exporters gain revenue from capacity that would otherwise sit idle. Both sides benefited from an arrangement built over a century of bilateral infrastructure investment by states, provinces, and private firms. The Trump administration's decision to impose a 10% tariff on Canadian energy products, which appears to apply to electricity, broke that century-old arrangement for the first time. Ontario's retaliatory 25% surcharge on electricity exports was the immediate response. The surcharge's rapid suspension does not change what it revealed: that electricity, previously treated as separate from trade politics, is now inside the trade conflict. The emergence of tariffs and the threat of power flow cuts introduces geopolitical risk into the cross-border electricity trade where none has ever existed before. The price impact of the tariff on American consumers is documented and specific, though the CSIS analysis notes it will be marginal and slow to emerge. Tariffs will likely erase most of the price advantage of Canadian power relative to domestic resources, meaning American markets will import less Canadian electricity and rely more on higher-priced domestic generation. The exact upward pressure on retail electricity bills will be far less than the 10% tariff rate, because imports represent only a small portion of total power supply in each American market. The wholesale price of electricity, the segment directly affected by the tariff, makes up only a portion of the total electricity rate, with transmission and distribution costs adding separately. Retail rate increases take additional time to materialize because utility rates are often fixed on 6-month, annual, or longer-term bases. The reliability dimension is where the stakes become most serious. A worst-case escalation, complete cessation of power flow between the two countries, would raise serious reliability concerns for both American states and Canadian provinces during periods of peak demand. New England provides the most documented example. The region imports approximately 5% of its total annual demand from Canada. During winter peaks in 2024, however, New England regularly imported well over 2 gigawatts of Canadian power during peak demand hours, representing up to 15% of total demand during those specific periods. Without those imports, during the periods when they are most needed, reliability would be very difficult to maintain. New York faces the most commercially significant infrastructure exposure of any American state because of the specific investments already made around Canadian hydropower access. New York invested $6 billion to build the Champlain-Hudson Power Express, a 339-mile underground transmission line, bringing 1,250 megawatts of Quebec hydropower directly to the New York City metro area. The project was designed to help New York retire fossil fuel generation, meet its ambitious climate targets, and access clean, reliable power from Quebec at competitive prices. With billions already invested and construction well underway, the project will not be halted. But with the current risk of tariffs on power flows across those wires, the transmission contracts that determine who captures the financial value of that infrastructure may require renegotiation with New York State authorities. Separately, in New England, the New England Clean Energy Connect project has invested over $1.1 billion in 54 miles of new transmission lines to bring 1,200 megawatts of Quebec hydropower to Massachusetts via Maine. That project also faces the same commercial uncertainty. The transmission infrastructure will be built, but the pricing and contractual terms that determine its economic viability are now subject to a risk environment that did not exist when the investment decisions were made. The long-term policy implications extend beyond price and reliability into decarbonization strategy. The states most exposed to disruption of Canadian electricity imports, New York and Massachusetts most prominently, are the same states with the most aggressive clean energy targets and the most constrained domestic alternative: supply options. Offshore wind development in the region is far behind schedule and increasingly costly. Domestic nuclear capacity is not being added. Scaling up carbon-free electricity imports from Quebec and Ontario has been called into question by the tariff environment. The Northeast already suffers from the highest electricity prices in the country outside of California, Hawaii, and Alaska, and now faces a rapidly narrowing option set. Unlike oil or gas pipelines, electric transmission lines can rapidly reverse the direction of power flow based on market conditions. The United States and Canada regularly switch roles as importer and exporter on daily and seasonal timescales depending on system conditions and relative prices. In the Midwest's MISO market, power flows switch directions within a single day. In the Pacific Northwest and California, a historic pattern of importing British Columbia hydropower has reversed in recent years due to drought conditions reducing Canadian output. This two-way dynamic relationship is what creates the optionality and reliability benefits for both countries that the bilateral electricity system has delivered over a century of integration. The electricity trade existed free of tariffs for 100 years because both sides recognized that market integration lowered costs and improved reliability simultaneously, a mutual benefit that made the absence of tariffs commercially obvious to every participant. Larger grids create more options and redundancies, which improve reliability and economic efficiency.